Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Does it sound good?
Beautiful.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Can I ask the brothers maybe, the old brothers there, you all sit down? Make it easier for me to kind of speak to me instead of staying on the bench and call out to me. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, and Jazakumullah khair for all attending, Jazakumullah khair for supporting the event, and for supporting the fundraiser, and Allah Azza wa Jalla allow us to be those who see the truth and we take action, and not only hear and move on, because a lot of the discussion today has to do with relevant things in our lives, and it's often very difficult to change our lifestyle and take actions that we basically become more diligent and start watching what we're supposed to be seeking in terms of ideals. Speaking of ideals, a lot of what I'm going to speak about today sound like ideals because of Hukum Shariah. A lot of it has to do with obeying Allah Azza wa Jalla, seeking the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jalla. In many cases, it translates to businesses losing profits, and the question is, for example, will the businesses actually sacrifice profits? Who's going to sacrifice profits? Everyone wants money. The other thing that I'd like to point out is that, although yes, alhamdulillah, shukr, I own Bismillah Meats, I'm not here to promote my business. It's going to be very difficult for me to convince you of that, especially if I speak a lot about my business, but that's really not the reason why I'm here. And it's enough for me to say that Allah is a witness over my intentions, and this is not at all my intention whatsoever. But rather, if I do speak about the example from my company, Bismillah Meats, it's because I'm speaking from the perspective of my own personal experience that I'm doing this myself. I do almost all the slaughtering in the plant, and I monitor every single step, all the way until the meat gets out the door. And so, I'm just demonstrating passive application, and that the ideals that I'm speaking of are realistic, and they're not just a dream that we all should achieve. Let's all try to be idealistic and try to come to a perfect world. I had a bit of a problem when I was putting this talk together, because the problem is this industry has two angles at the problem, and they're big angles. Each one is kind of independent. There's so much detail to go into with regards to each angle. So what I did is I prepared two talks, and I decided that I'm going to have you guys decide on which of the two you'd like to focus on. In addition to this, what I would like actually, and by the way, the talks that I give, I always prefer to make it interactive. So if you have a question, quite often the talk can go for half an hour, 40 minutes. And by the time a half an hour, 40 minutes comes along, the talk is finished, and there's a question and answer session in the end, well, things kind of become irrelevant. You forget about it, you're like, whatever, so we go. So if you have something important that you want to say that you think I'm not going to clarify in about 5-10 minutes, and you think it's going to become irrelevant later on, raise your hand. If I make a little signal, so hold on, or put your hand down, or not right now, then because I want to move on, or it's not a point that I want to pause at. But feel free to raise your hand, because quite often I will stop, I will pause, and I'll allow a discussion to take place. Because I'm not here just to lecture you, I'm here to discuss ideas and come to conclusions whether or not we agree with them. And I'm going to talk about things that I may be wrong about. Right? So I want everyone to come to the conclusion that whether or not they actually agree. And say, I disagree, hold on a second. So I'll clarify, and then we'll come to a conclusion together. The thing that I'm trying to achieve with this talk is to come to a practical application in reality, and not just come here and talk about dreams and goals and everyone walks out. I want people to focus on what you actually do yourself to help make things better. Regardless of how small it is, don't forget, Rasulullah was one man, and when he walked out of Mecca was 10,000 people. Quraysh was 10,000 approximately. He walked out with less than 1% of the population, and he changed the entire world forever with just that tiny percentage of people. It doesn't take a lot of people to change the world, but it just takes motivated individuals to change things, and that's one of the things that we aim for. So, talk number one focuses on the process of the meat industry, the process of taking care of the animals and so on. It starts from the farm. I start from the very beginning of where the animal comes from, to the transportation, etc., go all the way to the point of the slaughter, and the processing, delivery, and making it to your home. So I go into a lot of detail in this one about how the process takes place, about how the animals are treated, and so on and so forth. And we go through, and it's a little more intensive. There's actually a lot more detail about what happens at this point and that point. So if you are interested in knowing how every single step of the way the animal makes it all the way through, then this is the talk that you're going to want to vote for. And then the other one, which is the system focus, which is looking at the actual root, the core of the system that we're living in. Personally, and again, I'm going to say this, although I'm seeming biased, but this one's a little more enjoyable, but this one's a little more information intensive. It's actually, I find the second talk to be actually a little more productive, because we're talking about the core of this system and what exactly is wrong with it. It has to do with how do we identify the standards themselves? How do we know how we should treat an animal? Should we treat an animal like we treat our child? In that case, we can't eat it. Should we treat an animal like an insect? Just stomp on it and move on? Who decides this? On what basis? How can we possibly know? Look at a cow. Look at a cat. Look at your mother. Look at, your son or daughter. Look at a little picture. How do you identify any of these sorts of things? Look at a computer animated figure, like a Sims or something. I don't know, something weird. But the point is that how do you identify the limits? Who's there to guide you? On what basis are you defining what's right and wrong in this particular scenario? How can you possibly know that what's living? What about plants? Can we eat plants? Plants grow, animals grow, plants grow. So you shouldn't mistreat animals. So is it okay to go up to a branch and just cut half of it and then bend it? And so on. Like this is, where do you draw the line? You can get that from here. You just become vegans. We refuse to touch anything from an animal whatsoever. There's nothing whatsoever. I have a member of my family who's a vegan, so I'm going to be really tough on vegans. So, anybody who wants to hear the step-by-step procedure from farm to table and all what's in between and everything related to feed and the holding pens and all this kind of stuff and the slaughter procedures, you want to learn about how that all happens, and I know it's going to be a tough decision. Raise your hand yet, but that's choice A, and choice B if you want to hear about. But by the way, they do cross a little bit. I do talk about a little bit, but the focus is on one, and the focus is on the other. And the focus on the second talk is the system itself, whether or not you want to learn about the actual core concepts of the system, the root of where the problem actually comes from, why the system is immoral, and how exactly does Islam identify it and fix it. Everyone for talk number one, raise your hand. Oh my God, everyone for talk two, raise your hand. All right, solved. All right. I honestly thought everyone's going to go for one because it's easy. Okay, very good. Actually, I'm very happy that you chose it. This is the one because that means you're serious. Alhamdulillah. So let me ask you a question. If you knew the butcher that you go to buys from a slaughterhouse that mistreats animals, gives that poor food or no food when it arrives, gives it dirty water and doesn't keep track of the water that goes through, that the animals go through, and doesn't make sure the water is clean, you'll find also you go to certain places and you'll find that the water is full of urine and excrements, because sometimes they'll poop in there. And the animals drink from this. It's covered in straw sometimes or hay, and the animals can't even see through it. You'll see the difference. You go up to water that's dirty and the animals are thirsty. And I'll walk up to it and I'll remove all the straw and get all the dirt out of it. We have actually machines that actually automatically fill the water. So every time they drink, it fills up again. So there's always a fresh supply of water. But sometimes they kick around or whatever, and from store they have some straw, hay or straw and it falls. So you get all that out, and right away they come and start drinking. When it's covered in hay and straw, they're not going to try to drink through that. So if you knew that the slaughterhouse that you're buying from, and these are small things, what about prodding, electrocuting, and kicking the animals, and swearing, and hitting the animals, and being impatient, and stunning the animal, and cutting him properly, hanging the animal while it's still alive, and removing the hide while it's still alive, and so on and so forth. What if you knew that the butcher that you buy from buys from a slaughterhouse that could not care less about the welfare of the animal? And I know this is an easy question to answer. I'm not talking about giving you an easy answer. I'm talking about this is an answer between you and Allah. Ask yourself. If you put a steak on your table and you're about to take a bite and you knew what this animal went through, it went through a miserable life. It went through dirty food, dirty water, and the guys who put it through the system, who slaughtered it and so on, the animal went through horror because of this. And they couldn't care less. I've seen animals put into the restraining system in Muslim slaughterhouses. And they electrocute until the animal goes nuts. Until finally, because they actually had this one restraining system that was too long. So they had a deal that was a little too short. Its head wasn't sticking out to the restraining part, where you can lock down the head so you can slit the throat without stunning it. So what they would do is they'd go up behind the animal, and instead of kindly, like getting a stick, like we sometimes have a problem, getting a little stick and just kind of getting it to move forward. But rather than doing that, what they did is they got a prod, and have these guys swearing and swearing and swearing and yelling at the animal, just electrocuting until the animal's body twists, trying to get away from the pain. And then finally it just wants to get out, so it starts smashing back and forth, and it finally sticks its head out the hole, and they lock it down, and then they slaughter it. I know it's a very long question. But would you eat that meat? And I think a lot of people will say no, but I think you would. I'm not saying you, anyone think of it, but the general masses, most people would. Because what am I going to do? I'm also a butcher. But it's a good start to recognize the answer is no, I actually would if I could do something about it. Because that's what it comes down to. It's very difficult to be proactive. So, from this, we have to look at what is the minimum standard of acceptable treatment of animals. And let's start with the current system. What is the minimum standard that's acceptable in this system? In the Canadian system, the American system, the European system. What's the minimum standard? So going back to my initial question that I asked when I was trying to present the topic. The minimum standard has to start from the definition of what an animal is. What is a cat? Let's start with a cat. What is a cat? It's a living being. It feels probably some pain. You stab it and it's going to start kicking and whatever. Okay, so it visibly feels pain. What about emotional pain? You start telling it you're really fat, you're huge, you're slow, I think it's going to start feeling upset. Obviously not. But so where do you put it? Do you start overdoing it like some vegans where they say no, they must be treated like actual crazy people from PETA? And they'll say no, the animals are just like humans. We shouldn't even eat them. We shouldn't even make them into pets. Some crazy people actually will say. I think it's the head of PETA. She actually says we should not even make animals into pets. So I'd like to make it clear I'm not from PETA. Be very clear. So one thing that happens very easily in the industry is some guys treat animals like they are nothing. Literally nothing. It does not matter. And this is one of the issues, by the way. Actually, I'll tell you a little bit of the backstory on what I got into the industry. When I started the plant, it was back in October of last year. And I know I'm taking a pause away from the topic, but I think it's relevant. And so I had a computer store, and I decided to go into, actually a brother recommended to me that I take over a plant, and I started running it. And so I went through a lot of thinking, and I finally decided to do it. So I decided to fly out. I don't know if you've ever seen that video on YouTube. It's about that brother with a ponytail, and he takes the lamb and puts him down, and he says, Bismillah, and he makes a dua, and the animals calm down, and then he said, you put the hand. I went and visited him for a week, and they're the ones who trained me on how to run the plant. So, and inshallah, they're going to be coming actually. Again, this is really not advertising, but it's exciting to meet them. They're going to come, inshallah, in about a month and a half, they're going to come to our plant for a big event that we're going to have, and they're going to show everybody how this whole entire thing goes. They're really good brothers. So the thing is that the brother sat me down and told me that you're going to have to reconcile something very important at some point in time. He said the animals that I saw when I was with them were held down by them. And I had a bunch of guys around me. He said it's not a very difficult environment to deal with. But when you're alone and you grab a beautiful little goat that only weighs about 55 pounds, so it's only about this big, little guys, and you grab it and you slit his throat, you have to reconcile that somehow. You have to ask yourself, how can I do this to a living being? I just slaughtered this cute little thing. So how do you deal with that? And Islam tells us how to deal with that. So the problem that happens is the easy way to deal with it, if you don't have a strong aqidah, is that you look at the animal and you can't deal with it. Because death is a very serious topic if you don't believe in anything. It's a very frightening topic. It's a topic that makes people go crazy. So how do they deal with it? They just turn it off. They treat the animal like it's a piece of wood. I'm just cutting a piece of wood. Right? It's nothing. So what they do is they end up shutting off their emotions. That's why you find a lot of butchers and a lot of guys who work in this industry. They're very cold people. They're very unemotional people. They're really hard. They're doing this because they're tough. Right? So a lot of guys come to sugar, and tough guys, but when you see good Muslims working in these plants, you'll find that a lot of times they become actually emotional when they're working. They may show it, they may not show it. But it should soften your heart like Salah does when you slaughter an animal. Because it's important to remember, from the Islamic perspective, it's a living being. But I'm not going to skip to the Islamic viewpoint just yet. So what happens with people who do not have guidance, and that's the primary point in this, the system is without guidance. They're just guessing. They're trying to figure things out as they go along. So how do they define the standard? They just guess. And a lot of them have good intentions. There's Ontario humanitarian supervisor who I've spoken to, and we've talked about a lot of things, and they have a lot of standards. And I look at all these standards, And I realized some of them are very good standards, and some of them are ridiculous standards. And it's very clear they're just bouncing around in the dark, just trying to find a way to protect the animals, because these people care about living things. But they'll make standards that I look at and I think, you have no idea what you're doing. If you really have no idea what you're doing. You've crossed into this weirdo kind of area where you're treating animals a little too good. It's not necessary. One of the examples of this is that we're not allowed to lift the lamb, because what we did during the last Eid is that people come and they pick their own lamb, and we carry the lamb like a baby. And we walk it into the slaughtering place, and the person can get to watch their lamb slaughter, or they can slaughter it themselves. In the end, we decide not to let people slaughter their lamb because they got a little bit dangerous, but so we slaughter it for them. But the regulations say that you can't even lift the animal into the thing, you have to drag it in there. And so, or you have to push it or usher it or whatever it may be. The reality is that that's unnecessary, because we're carrying them. Like if you fold their legs properly and you walk it in, the animal's comfortable, especially a little goat. But it's not allowed. So there's certain things that you can't think, okay, like why? Where are you coming? And of course I understand why. It's because they allowed that. Then it can be reinterpreted that you can hang cows while they're alive and roll them through and just start slaughtering them. So they want to stop that, so they stop everything. That's another story altogether. There's a lot of things actually when you look into the industry. There's a lot of confusing, mixed up things, and that's the problem with a system that is based on man-made law. Okay? With no guidance beyond man's logic and man's rational thinking and man's feelings. So, the cost-benefit analysis is the root of this industry. When they look at an animal coming in, they want to see what is the best thing that I can do to this animal to make the most money out of it and minimize waste and minimize expense. As I said, you'll find there's a lot of morals in this industry, and you'll find that it's very, people are very motivated. But the problem with this, with the morals, as I said, the whole good treatment animal, there's no consequence, very little consequence for people who don't abide by the standard and get away with it. And realistically, there's not a lot of ways to stop them, like for us, when I look at my inspectors. They wouldn't let us get away with a lot of stuff. They would let a lot of things pass through. If it wasn't for me saying, no, stop the animal before it goes to the cooler, I want to check it, or trim everything away. I'll now get the details of how that works. So the thing is that it's because they look at animals in a particular way as just enough, just don't hurt them too much or whatever. And then they let a lot of things through. But when you let a lot of things through, and I just want to contrast this quickly to Islam, in Islam, you're caught before you even commit a crime. In this system, if you get away with it, you never committed a crime. A little kid goes in and steals some Kit Kat, a guy goes and robs a bank, whatever. A guy goes and rapes someone. If he doesn't get caught, according to a system that doesn't believe in consequence on akhirah, it doesn't believe in akhirah, then you have a situation where who cares what happens, as long as people don't get hurt, as long as people don't get sick. Who cares if there's some feces got smeared on the side of the cow and all I do is spray it off and throw it into the cooler. And by the way, that's one thing to think about, by the way. Sometimes when you're removing the internals of an animal, I don't know if it's really kind of cool, but you're removing the internals of the animal, and then sometimes as you're pulling stuff out, you mistakenly, as you're cutting the trim away, you mistakenly cut into the stomach, or into the intestines, or into the bladder, or whatever it may be, and sometimes you'll get some stuff falling onto the carcass. What do you do in that scenario? According to the system, the rule is you must trim away all the external fat and all whatever touched. You must throw it all away because it's contaminated and there's no washing this. But what does really happen? Again, it's a system that has no moral consequence. So they just wash it off and push it through. I had a new guy working with us. He just joined us, and he's working lots of he's working slaughterhouses this whole way. And when we were done, he said, I've never seen anybody do what you guys do. And it's because I am accountable to Allah Azza wa Jalla. So if something goes through, even if nobody knows, Allah Azza wa Jalla knows. And that's the point. We are caught before we commit the crime. Before you even have the intention to commit the crime. Whatever it may be. I'm not saying any of these things necessarily crimes. But if, let's say you want to go and use money that doesn't belong to you, or you want to go and yell at your mother, or swear at her, or your father, commit some sort of something that's haram. Before you ever even step in the direction of that crime, Allah has already caught you because He knows that you were going to do it, and when you did it, it was written down, and you will be accounted for on Yawm al-Qiyamah if Allah doesn't forgive you. That's the premise of the Islamic viewpoint, and that's the guidance. And that's just the beginning, because there's ahkam related to this as well. There are principles on how Islam identifies what the limits are. There's another question in this system, which is the question of sentience. Do animals know they're going to be slaughtered, and so on? There's a lot of debate about how this all functions within the system, but again, there's a lot of guesswork. It's all guessing. And I want to kind of draw a small analogy to another topic, which is, for example, abortion. Abortion is one of the most confusing topics in the Western world. Is abortion allowed? Even Christians, the moral source of all morals in the West, really, that's their primary religion. And they're unsure. When is the baby alive? At what point in time? How many days? How many months? Can you kill after 1 month? After 2 months? I've heard of an article where there's a woman who didn't want her baby, and the baby, I think, was 6 months or 7 months. What they did is that she laid on the ground, and the husband or the boyfriend stood up and started punching her and stomping her in the stomach, and she started punching herself until the baby died. They ended up going to jail. But I mean, going on for whatever short period of time. But the thing is that for them, again, no guidance. So they look at the thing, well, it hasn't been born yet. And there's a lady, some psychologist, some philosopher out in Europe, I think, I don't know where she was, and she was talking about that you can kill a baby, a born baby, because it has no morals, no ambition. So it's okay to kill it, because it doesn't even recognize its own existence. So this is the thing. And this, by the way, translates into the meat industry. Yes?
Isn't it a little problematic that us versus them, dichotomy? Because, I feel like we are actually learning, I think, from them. This ethical framework is, we had our tradition, of course, in the Quran, of course, we have like a long history of it, but we lost it. And it is true, the West, that we are rediscovering our own tradition. I'm sure, we have, a lot of guidance, but we have to give them that credit that, it can't be that us versus them.
Sure. And the thing is that also don't forget is that when you look at what's going on in the Muslim world, whether it's Arab world or the subcontinent, or further east, or further north into the Balkans, or further south into Africa, you'll find that none of those societies, except some to some extent, are actually raised specifically according to the standards and the ahkam shariah of the Quran and Sunnah. So a lot of us, when we come here, we've been raised. I lived in Iraq for 5 years when I came out here. I remember what it was like to be raised there. You're raised to have utter nationalistic loyalty. You're taught to just get whatever you can. In Syria, everything's done by bribes. In Iraq, everything's done by fear. In Palestine, everything's all about the struggle. Everybody has their own viewpoint on this particular thing, but the source wasn't really Islam in the first place. When you look at what goes on here, there's a lot of good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's all bad. That's what I'm saying. There's morals of people who care, there's humanitarian regulations and so on. But when you compare it to the pure Quran and Sunnah, now Muslims are doing it. Now we've been doing it for the last 100 years. There's also the problem with that. But when you look at actually just take all the history aside and all Muslims come aside, we just look at the Quran and Sunnah, what Rasulullah and Sahaba did, and you look at the standards that were set by Islam from day one. Those standards, and I will get to that inshallah, those standards are the epitome. It defines all the lines for us, it defines all the limits for us, it defines all what is acceptable and unacceptable, and it puts moral consequence on the table, saying that you will be held accountable on Yawm al-Qiyamah even if you get away with it. But even in a system, under an Islamic system, the government would still be involved, of course. And if it's a khilafah, it would still be coming in, regulate, check, and make sure things are being done properly. But even if you weren't caught, you're going to be caught on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And that's the difference. So it's not a matter of saying that us versus them. It's Islam versus everything, right?
They have their, Christian and understanding of God as well, and accountability as well. So
yes, but they don't have the regulations, and that's the difference. So they do have accountability, but they don't have specific ahkam. For example, for Muslims, we have a definition of clothing, for example, like hijab, we have a definition of nudity. Right, so Islam says that a woman is everything but the face and hands, for a man everything from the belly except for, everything from the belly up to the knee. When it comes to food, it gives all the regulations. When it comes to marriage, when it comes to business contracts, when it comes to politics, when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to currency laws, economics.
I don't think they're that.
Well, I've studied them. I've studied all these things in great detail. And that's what's interesting is, for example, Islam. And I'll give you a small example, and then we'll try to get back. But just to give you a small example, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "And nasu shuraka." He said, all people are partners in 3 natural resources: water sources, fire sources, green open pastures, and fire sources. So what he did in this hadith, he defined public property is energy sources and fire sources, so for example, natural gas, electricity, all these things, and then water sources, so hydropower, open lakes, rivers, oceans, and so on, and then green pastures. So what that identifies, for example, is that oil, according to shariah, according to Islam, cannot be privatized by anybody in the world. Oil fields belong to the public, and therefore all the oil in the Muslim world belong to the people of those lands, and it doesn't belong to any one private company. Just one small example. So these are the sorts of things that we've lost touch with these things. We've lost touch with regulations, whether it's in the meat industry or whether in the business world or whatever else it may be. And because we don't know the ahkam, we feel these ahkam don't exist. But once you study them, you realize that they're all there. Allah, the Quran said, وَمَا فَرَّطْنَا فِي الْكِتَابِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. We've got nothing. Nothing out of the book. We've missed nothing. Allah says, فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ حَتَّى يُحَكِّمُوكَ فِيمَا شَجَرَ بَيْنَهُم. But know by your Lord, Allah says, but know He swears by Himself, you do not have true belief unless you refer all of your problems to the Quran and to Rasulullah. And then it says, ثُمَّ لَا يَجِدُ فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَرَجًا مِمَّا قَضَيْتَ وَيُسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. And then they find nothing in themselves in resistance, and they give in to the ahkam in full submission. So that's the thing, is that He commands us to refer to the Quran and Sunnah, and He tells us that He's missed nothing. So from this, we should at least know the basic, even if you don't know the specifics. The basis is Islam does give regulations and laws for everything. When you look at the Bible, or you look at the Torah, or you look at any other source of law, they don't have a complete set of laws. It's missing certain aspects in politics or in economics, or in the social system, or in the ruling system, or in the foreign policy, or in the penal code, or whatever else it may be. There's always bits and pieces missing from those things. So going back to the point, which is the current system of how they regulate things, there are some things. I want to go to the topic of stunning. The topic of stunning is a very controversial topic. In Canada, they allow Muslims and Jews to slaughter without stunning. It's called ritual slaughter. And they're the only two religions that are allowed to not slaughter. Everybody else in the whole of Canada must stun, because it's considered a humane practice. So when I got into the industry, I felt a little confused. Because first of all, when you stun an animal, it takes about 8 minutes, minimum, give or take, for the animal to die, a big beef, for it to die. When you stun it takes that long for it to die, for its heart to stop. So the way that they do this is that they stun the animal's gone, it's stunned, it's knocked out, because what it does is that's a bolt. Oh, by the way, I'll give you an idea. Stunning, it's a gun. Okay, there's two ways of doing it. With a gun, it's a gun with a bolt, a steel bolt inside, that's hollow in the middle. And it has a blank cartridge. You put it in the end and you shoot it, and it shoots out a piston, and the piston comes back. And what it does is it blows through the skull and blows the brain up. But the heart keeps on beating for about 7 minutes, 8 minutes, give or take. That's what they do. Everywhere that you see that's not halal and not kosher, blows the brains out of the cat. The animal goes unconscious, and then they actually, right there, take the animal and start hanging it, and then they cut the throat. The animal must die with a slit to the throat. Now they do it one of two ways: either across the throat or into the throat to the heart, and then they open it up. It's really close stuff. I apologize for going into so much detail, but these are important things to know. The second way that they do it with electrocution. With electrocution, you have these two rods that are connected to an electrical current, and you put it on the animal's neck, and the animal just gets shocked and shocked and shocked and shocked, and then it passes out. And then you slit its throat. What I found so interesting, and I got into debates, I got into discussions with humanitarian ladies. She's telling me you should consider stunning because it's humane, and I'm like, no, there's no way, I'm going to shut down my plant before I ever do that. Lost the back and forth, and she's trying to convince me because she really, really believes in this, and she doesn't like the fact that we don't stun. And when I saw the inspector's face, when he first started slaughtering without stunning, he looked really a little sad. But as time progresses, they're starting to understand how good it is. Because one thing I noticed about stunning, it's not about humane animal treatment, it's about humane human treatment. We don't want to see what happens when you cut the throat and the animal's sitting there and gasping, and it looks like it's freaking out, and it starts kicking and all this kind of stuff. So let me describe to you, and again I apologize for going into details, but it's important. And I know this is not fun, but at least it'll make it a little more entertaining. Okay. I'm going to describe to you halal slaughter, how it happens, how we do it. When the animal comes in from I'm not going to go detail how the animal gets there, but we have a custom-made slaughter box. It's a box that has the thing that drops behind the animal once the animal walks into the box, and it pushes the animal forward. That way we don't have to prod or anything like that, and make sure the animal moves up. There's a hole in the end that has one part that goes up and down, and then there's a chin lift. So when the animal's head comes out the front, the neck thing drops behind the head, and then lifts up its chin. At this point in time, the animal is completely restrained. They can't move, they can't do anything. In the time of Rasulullah ﷺ, they would have to throw ropes around the legs of the animals and tie it, and then you have to pull it and knock the animal down. and then you go up to the animal, you lift up its chin, you have to put a rope around its mouth and pull the head over to the side, and then you can cut the throat. So it has to do with restraining, it's the same type of restraining. But our restraint, it keeps the animal upright, it keeps him comfortable, keeps him calm, and then you cut the throat at that particular point in time. Same thing with lamb and goat. We have a little restrainer, a little smaller, so there's another big restrainer. And the animal goes in, and then you put a bar behind its head, you lift up its neck, and you cut the throat. Now, what's interesting about all of this is, subhanAllah al-Azim, when you slaughter enough animals, and probably most people never slaughter an animal, but if you ever want to, go ahead and do it. And if you do it, watch what happens. There's so much to learn from the creation of Allah Azza wa Jalla when you do this. I know it sounds gross, it sounds difficult, and I'm telling you, I came from the computer world, okay? I've been in computers almost my entire life. I own a computer store, and all I did was to sit there and sit on the computer all day long, and sell computers all day long, and even when I got a dirty computer, I used to kind of hold it like this, and I would blow it all up and clean it all up, because I don't want to touch dirty computers. I live in a very clean environment. When someone told me, go and open up a slaughterhouse, I thought, you're insane. But it was only because of dua and a lot of istikhara that actually I got shoved towards. I was telling brothers when I was leading up to it, I was like, Allah Azza is forcing me in this direction. Okay, if it wasn't for me seeing all these signs pushing me this way, I wouldn't be doing this right now. After slaughtering enough animals and I got comfortable with it, I started watching what happens to the body after you cut the throat. You see, we're designed, when you cut something, you close it, you pull away, you try to defend yourself, you try to stop the bleeding. Your body curls into the cut. It isn't that you cut yourself, you're not going to go like this. You cut yourself, you go like this. You cut your hand, you go like that. It's natural for you to protect your body. But when you cut an animal's throat, the body actually subhanAllah, it does the opposite. It opens itself up to the wound and it starts pumping the blood out as hard as it can. It switches mechanisms from defense to actually dying as fast as it can if you do it right. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I memorized a different hadith, but I found a stronger hadith. إن الله كتب الإحسان على كل شيء فإذا قتلتم فأحسنوا القتل وإذا ذبحتم فأحسنوا الذبح وليحد أحدكم شفرته وليرح ذبيحته. إن Allah Azza wa Jalla decreed that if you're going to complete a task, then you must perfect it. If you kill a dying animal, then you kill it with perfection. And if you're going to slaughter an animal, you slaughter it with perfection. And you must sharpen your knife, and you must make the animal comfortable. So what I found was, when you look at هل جزاء الإحسان إلا الإحسان in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Rahman, is the reward for ihsan. Anything other than ihsan is the reward for perfection. Anything other than perfection from Allah Azza wa Jalla. What I've noticed is the better you are at completing a task, according to the design of Allah Azza wa Jalla, the more rewarding it is. The calmer the animal is, the better the quality of the product comes out, but also the better the animal responds. If you cut it properly from start to finish, what happens is, for example, with a lamb, if you cut from side to side, you cut all the components, there's a lot of four components, you cut all the components. SubhanAllah, the animal within 3 seconds, maybe 4, it's gone. You see the animal jump forward because it's trying to breathe, but it doesn't really feel the pain, like it's not trying to stop the pain. And then suddenly it drops, it lays on its side, and about 4 seconds later, it's gone. You see its eyes roll kind of back. Yes.
How does it drop and lay on its side when there's a bar behind it holding its neck?
Because we release the bar and pull the door down.
So you cut it and release the bar.
What's that?
You cut and then you release the bar?
Yeah, because there's 2 sides. It's like plastic sides, and then there's the metal T-bar in front of it. Whenever the animal comes in, you put the bar behind its head, you slaughter, you pull the bar away, and then you open the door. And the door allows the animal to fall on its side. So what I aim to do whenever I slaughter is I aim to get the animal on its right-hand side, not for any particular sin reason, but just because that's the direction that we have the door. And then you try to get the animal on its side, because what happens is it opens up its neck. And it actually, you see the muscles tensing up and then releasing. And tensing up and releasing, and it actually gets all the blood out. And it's designed to clean up the inside of the animal. It's designed to clean up the product. Animals are designed by Allah Azza wa Jalla for food. And He designed processes for us to use, and He tests us in that. Who's going to be careful, and who's going to smack them around and slaughter them. If they're agitated, there's signs. Actually, subhanAllah, if an animal, if a cow, for example, there's this thing called bloodshot. You get bloodshot. If the animal's bloodshot, meat's bloodshot, you'll find lots and lots of little red spots. If the animal is terrified when you kill it, the whole rear of the cow is bloodshot. And there's nothing you can do to get that out. You have to sell the meat bloodshot. So everybody knows that your animal was terrified when you killed it. So the thing is, Allah rewards you for doing things well, and He sometimes will punish you or expose you or let you go. But generally in His design, there are consequences for doing things wrong, whether it's in current or whether it has to do with accountability of the Qiyamah. So in the current system, the way things are, and actually remind me if I'm running out of time because I can walk for hours, really. But is there any particular... Absolutely. So, in terms of the low end of the standard with regards to the current system, you'll find in terms of poor feed or dirty water or directly harming the animal or using electrical cross too much, having a dirty environment, making mistakes in stunning, not stunning the animal. Like, one other thing to consider about stunning is that when an animal is stunned, and then it's supposedly gone, they'll cut the throat and they'll start removing the hide before 8 minutes comes up. One of our weaknesses is that we're very slow in the beginning. The first animal coming in, it takes us like 10 minutes, 15 minutes to kill the animal. Because the animal has to come in, we wait until it comes in, where the animal comes in calmly, we fully restrain it, and then we kill it. And then we wait about 5 minutes for it to die. Whereas with them, they stun it, move it out, hang it out, grab another one, stun it, bring it out, hang it out, bring the next one. That's how you have 100 beef an hour. It's plants that do 100 beef per hour through one single chain. Stun, put it through, stun, put it through, stun. For us, it's like, there's no way we can do that. You bring the animal in, you wait until it's relaxed, then you split it, then you slaughter it, and then you wait until it's fully bled out, and then you take it out. We're very slow, and we're losing a lot of money because of this. But again, this is how the Shariah teaches us. That first of all, we have a lot of components that organize our lives. This is from Allah, and this, by the way, this business is very sustainable at this rate. Very sustainable. I don't need to be a millionaire. I don't have to open up a plant where I make around 200 million a year. It's about making a living. It's not about becoming a millionaire. So calming the animal from the Islamic perspective and taking care of the animal from the Islamic perspective is guided by shariah, and it is guarded by an understanding of accountability. Allah tells us that even if a goat with horns goes and headbutts a goat without horns, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, Allah will give the second goat horns to go and butt the first goat. That's what Allah teaches us about justice and about doing things right. You know the story of the prostitute who saw a very thirsty dog trying to get water out of a well? A lot of us have. She took off her shoe and she dipped it into the well and fed the dog with that shoe. And Allah said that, as far as I remember, if I'm not mistaken, 2 different hadith, that I am more merciful than that. Although I think this is referring to a man who forgave him and another man is dead. But either way, Allah forgave all of our sins and allowed her to enter Jannah. So the Sahaba asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they asked him, do we get reward for even treating animals well? Like these are animals. Think about the mentality back then. You have an animal, you ride it all day, they have lots of contact with animals. So for them it's an animal. We put a bunch of stuff. It's even not allowed now for you to overburden an animal with weight. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لِكُلِّ كَبَدٍ حَرَّ أَجْرٍ. In every hungry or thirsty body, there's an opportunity for ajr. In every living thing that needs something, there's an opportunity for ajr. So you get ajr for every single thing you do to take care of the animal. And then there's consequences. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, a woman was punished due to her caging a cat until it died. And she was thrown into the hellfire for it. She neither gave it food, then whether it's in, as far as I know, either it's in one of the top 6, I think it's Bukhari or it's in one of the major hadith books, it is Sahih. A woman was punished due to her caging a cat until it died, and she was thrown into the hellfire. She neither gave it food or water after caging it, nor did she let it run free and eat just from the grass. She just imprisoned. She couldn't just let it go. She imprisoned it and let it die. So Allah threw her in the hellfire. These are our standards and these are the consequences. So just like we as Muslims, we require guidance from Allah on what's the best way to worship Him. Like how do we worship Allah? Do we know how to pray Salah? Born around a bonfire, sacrifice virgins. What do you do? Like look at all the confusion throughout history. But the thing is that Allah teaches us salah and fasting and dua, zakah, and all the acts of ibadah. And just like we require organization with ourselves, how to dress, how to have good manners, how to run our daily lives, how to eat, what to eat, all these things. And just like He gives us guidance on how to treat each other when it comes to business and marriage and family and so on, He also gives us direction on how to organize our relationship with animals. So from this, we know that keeping the animal calm and treating the animal with respect to the point that it's, of course, keeping it, and I guess this would be the conclusion of the Hukm Shari, is that you treat it with the respect of a human up until the point of the fact that you're going to eat it. Because animals were designed for food. Like I said, the process of the slaughtering and everything like this, you notice that cows were not made to be home pets. You can't have a cow walking around your house, walking through your living room. They're not designed to be zoo pets. They're not a very fun zoo pet. They're designed to be eaten. So within that, we treat them with the maximum amount of respect up until the point of slaughtering, and even at the point of slaughtering, we try to minimize the pain. The animals are not allowed to see the knife. Animals are not allowed to see other animals being slaughtered, because I've noticed with my own two eyes the response of animals when they see another animal being slaughtered. They become completely terrified, where they all push themselves into a corner, and they just won't move. And so the thing is that this is the indicators that we find. So we need to recognize that animals, and actually there's a lady named Deborah Grandin who's she's the foundation of this whole beef industry in terms of animal rights, because so it's not a really big topic. It's one of the most interesting topics I came into in this industry, that she's autistic. And subhanAllah, how many autistic people look around the world just like animals do. And I don't mean that in an insulting way. I have a great deal of admiration for autistic people. Not like, they're handicapped and they're working. No, as in they're geniuses. They're designed by Allah to be extremely focused on certain things. And one of the things this lady was extremely good at is she was able to see things, how animals see things, and she gave us insight onto what causes animals to react the way they do. And that's why I designed my whole holding area based on her research, which is the things to get the animal going from A to B. For example, there's one plant, $1 million plant, a multi-million-dollar plant, and the animals weren't moving. Right? They open the gates, they're making noises, they're clapping their hands, these guys didn't want to hurt the animals. So they spent all this money building this plant. So they called Temple Grants to come and take a look, because they spent millions on it, and they were going to change everything. They called her in and she said, open that door. She opened this one gate and all the animals start flooding out. It's because she sees the things that make them afraid. She sees the cracks in the ground. She sees the flapping of a piece of cloth. She sees the shining of a light. She sees a dark area and a light area. Because she feels the same fear that the animals do. So these are the really interesting things, subhanAllah, that we learn from some people who I consider to be gifts from Allah, because they allow us to progress, because Allah just shuts off a mechanism, which is a social mechanism, and makes them focused on solving a task that we've spent all these years and we just can't figure it out. So Allah has given us guidance, and He's promised us rewards, and He's warned us of consequences. And what that does, and like I said, I'm going back to the whole point of ideals. It sounds like an ideal, but believe me, the world is getting better. The Muslims are getting better, and the bad people, not just the bad Muslims, good Muslims, don't get me wrong, but the world, if you look at the world today, there seems to be this rift opening up between the people who are becoming better and the bad people who are becoming worse. The uprising in the Muslim world, and then there's a lot of things going on if you look around what's going on in the world. People are committing bigger and bigger crimes, and the good people are getting better and better. They're actually standing up, and I see 14, 15, 16-year-olds studying shariah. They come to me and ask me questions that adults haven't asked me almost my entire life. So people are coming back to their deen and they're focusing. And the thing is about this is that Islam, the way that Islam identifies how the whole industry should run, is according to these principles. We may not see that's going to happen anytime soon, but I know it's going to happen soon, inshallah. Maybe not in Canada, but it's going to start somewhere in the world. And that is what Allah SWT promised us, that change is going to come after that period, just like the period that we're having. So how does this reflect on our personal lives? And this, inshallah, I'll end with this. What's our responsibility? What are we going to do with all this information? I talked about a lot of stuff and you probably forgot about at least what happened. So what are you going to do? What are we going to do? First of all, very simply, and I know this is not going to be easy, and I know it's very difficult to keep up this sort of thing, but if you really are determined, you will. First of all, think about what you're eating. It's a very simple premise. Before you eat, and you're going to keep on eating, you're like, oh my God, I don't know where this stuff came from, but you're going to keep on eating because I just bought all this meat. I have free steaks and ground beef and whatever, But the thing is that that's the start. Where did it come from? Maybe ask your butcher. Who does he buy from? Maybe find out the slaughterhouse. Look into it, go visit. Of course, they're going to give that presentation when you go there. But the thing is, look into their standards. Keep in mind one very sad fact is that most butchers, if not almost all butchers, are buying from places who don't care if it's halal. When they give you meat, you're a market. We're a market. If I know, actually, I don't know if you know Blossom Cure in Mississauga, Brother Fahim Adwan, he's mentioned, he's gone to plants and he's worked in plants and he's seen all sorts of stuff. And they have one Muslim guy slaughtering. That's it. There's not a single Muslim cook. That guy gets sick. What are they going to do? Shut down the whole entire process? No. Bring another guy slaughter and just call it halal. And he's seen it with his own two eyes. That's what we're dealing with here. So find out little things here and there. The second thing is, we should, if we find out that a certain place has poor practices or has a reputation for poor practices, we should try to not buy from those sources and try to put pressure on our butchers to switch to a better source. There's, for example, a place called Sanada near Hamilton. It's a halal place owned by Muslims. Halal, they don't stop. There's another place north of between here and Toronto, and they also, it's called, I forget what it's called. Actually, I have a whole list of all the slaughterhouses in Ontario. And they don't stop. And and it's again owned by Muslims, and the process is clean. So go out of your way to try to find butchers that buy from good places, or go out of your way to buy direct from slaughterhouses that treat their animals well. And there are a lot. They're not all over the place, but there are some throughout Ontario. And of course, like I said, keep up with butchers and remind them of their responsibility, and even go and demand certain places. Tell them, I only want to buy from this particular place. Talk to them and spread the word. Because public opinion doesn't start by you sitting there waiting for someone else to do it. Public opinion starts by you going and talking, minding, and so on until something changes. So it's your call. You can think about it or you can let it go. At the end of the day, we're not going to all die very soon. And don't forget about another thing as well, which is cross-contamination. We buy our halal meat from a place that also sells halal meat and also sells pork, which is also halal meat. The odds of there being cross-contamination is very, very high. A lot of places, and again, I've seen this with my own wives, and other people do this with at their places, they've seen it. What they do is the same knives, the same cutting machine, the same bandsaw that they use to cut the pork, spray it down, bring the halal meat, move it over, bring the next meat, more and more halal meat. Put the halal meat here, put this here, put that there. Because for them, like, Muslims aren't going to die if you get a little bit of, non-halal meat in your meat. No one's dying. Look at all the non-Muslims that are eating all this meat. They're not dying. They're not all growing tentacles and getting all diseases. So what's the problem? Because they don't understand that for us, it's an Islamic obligation, and Allah has designed the halal system to be best for the animal and best for us. أقول بارك الله استغفر الله لي ولكم جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Any questions?
What about Mennonites? Because I know a lot of Muslims, including myself, who go to Mennonite farms to slaughter animals.
Yeah.
And my other question would be, how do you know that a farm doesn't use a Muslim farm because they keep their animals, other animals? But I know they do that with chickens and stuff, because they put the animal byproduct in.
Ever since the mad cow disease problem, the regulations have been very strict. You cannot feed animals other animals. And in terms of, but of course, a lot of times it has to do with the real problem in terms of feed is GMO, right? Corn is not natural for animals to really eat, but it's the cheapest thing to feed them. So you'll find honey. So that's one thing. So that's what. But in terms of in Canada, in the US it's legal, but in Canada it's illegal to use hormones. Although some people do, but by the time here, who knows? Right? You'll find that this guy's selling these huge animals for an unreasonably low price. You know something's wrong. Some people just still buy it, and I always tell them, are you nuts? This guy's selling 50% cheaper than the market price. There's no way this can be normal. There's something wrong with this. So things like this. In terms of the Mennonites actually, it's not the Mennonites. People confuse the Mennonites with the Amish. Right? I buy from the Amish, right? Sometimes I buy from the Amish. The Mennonites, my wife's actually a Mennonite convert, so I live amongst them and so on. They're just regular Christians, and they're not really farmers, they're woodworkers, and they're hard workers, and so on. But it's the Amish who are the ones that stay away from technology, and they drive the horse carrier. They're super nice people. You walk down the road, you drive up the road, every single one of them you see. You always wait for them. If you ever ride past Amish, the hats and the big beards, and the ladies wearing clothes from the 1600s or something like that. You wait for them, because they're all going to be waving at you. Them, I love buying from them because they personally disagree. with any genetically modified stuff. Sometimes sometimes you have to buy it for the market, but generally they'll grow their own stuff. And they'll take very good care of the animals. Last April, I brought in 75 lamb from one Amish guy that I'm really close, really good guy. When I spoke to him, he'd never heard of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, never heard of him. Right? It's not a nice, really long talk to him. He's a very honest guy. He's kind of interested, but he feels weird because he has to look over his whole life again. Anyway, so I bought 75 lamb. So, did I miss something? Anyway, so, what's that? Yeah. And so what happened was that I brought the 75 lamb in, and I had people from, and another guy brought his lamb as well. I had people canceling their order with him and wanting to buy it from mine because it looked so bright and clean and healthy. Right? Their faces were almost white as snow. These guys take very good care of their animals. So there's something that's very good, but the problem is, by law, you cannot slaughter an animal on someone else's farm and take it home. They can slaughter for their own consumption, but if they get caught, they can get a couple, and I know some of them have gotten caught. Personally, I've known the guy who got caught. He used to do it regularly, and he got caught, and he got fined and chased by him. He's being monitored up until some point in the past. So there's lots of little problems that happen with regards to getting things slaughtered at the farm. But, I mean, if you're slaughtering yourself, or you have something you don't go slaughter, then yeah, fine, as long as it's a clean environment.
Sorry. The other thing that maybe sort of corners had to know that some, and let's say, when generals are starting to know how the chicken is done, they know that there's certain indicators on the actual meat. When you look at it, I'm looking at the corners have to.
In terms of chicken, we don't slaughter chicken in our facility. In many of the law, to slaughter pheasants and that whole realm has to be in a complete separate facility. You can have no cross-contamination. So inshallah, in time, in about a year, we're planning to open up a chicken facility, but in the meantime, we only do beef, veal, goat, and lamb. So I haven't had direct experience with the actual, even I've seen and so on, but I've never done it myself, so I can't know directly. I do know with mechanical slaughtering is a big problem because they drop water on the animals with electricity, and that's what shocks them. And the amount of electricity required to shock them is approximately the amount of electricity required to kill them. So there's a bit of a gray area there. Then the animal goes through, and his head's held down in this rolling kind of belt system, and it goes across, and there's a little blade. The problem with the way the blade is, as the animal's coming through and the blade's turning, sometimes the head will turn with the blade, and it won't get cut. And the animal's still alive, and then it gets put into the boiler to get their and it dies there. So there's a lot of bad things with regards to, and plus it can't really be halal because nobody can say this and Allah on every single one because you get like 5-6 per second going past your face. But you can't say this Bismillah Allah on every single one. That's why I have to spoil But in terms of any indicators on the body, I don't know personally of any. I do know that sometimes you may be able to see, again, the blood. You'll find some blood with one that is bled properly. You'll find a little less blood. You won't find blood small, very little. I do notice for our meat, obviously, people have noticed that when they're cooking it, they say that it's very, very little blood that comes out, especially with lamb. With lamb, we even have people coming out like we did the last few lambs as well. We're always rocking it. It was practically white. Right, so especially, that's the thing I was saying about the whole thing with what Allah is rewarding in the dunya and in the afterlife. When you slaughter properly and you know you get it right, the animal hardly moves, it's calm. You look at the meat at the end and it looks beautiful. Right, so that's another thing as well. But aside from that, I don't know any other specific indicators about chicken.
You said 6 chickens per second?
Well, give or take.
Why can't you have like 6 people in a row just saying Allah Akbar together? No.
Well, the problem is because Shar'an, I know you have to open, but Shar'an, you have to say the Bismillah or Allah Akbar on that particular chicken, with your intention on that particular chicken. Right, so if you have everyone saying, like, the man is going to go, you can't control it. There's no, did you say Bismillah Allah Akbar on that one or that one? Or, oh, hold on, stop the line, bring them back. I don't know, it'll get very confusing. That's why it has to be known. You have to know that you said Bismillah Allah Akbar on the animal, and you have to, and so it has to be very specific.
Yeah. My real question was this. You explained how the Canadian system, the regulations, is for like when they cut up a cow and the feces or whatnot touches the meat, they have to cut it off, right? But they usually wash it off. What's the Islamic way to deal with this?
The same thing as the Canadian regulations, which is that you cut it off.
You cut it off?
Yeah, now there's no specific shariah regulation saying you have to cut the meat off, but that is the best practice.
Last and not least, Maple Lodge opinion.
Maple Lodge?
Yeah, like I've heard lots of.
Just like on a speakerphone.
There's a lot of, the thing with me is that first of all, I don't talk about these things unless I see it myself. There's a lot of rumors, I've seen a lot of rumors, and I don't accept rumors. And the thing is that I accept this as truth, don't get me wrong, I'm not denying it, but I haven't seen it myself, and therefore I'm not going to talk about it. That's the main thing. There's also another problem too, by the way. Whenever I talk about these particular topics, I can't and I won't mention any particular company, because if anybody wants to know what they do, then you can look into it for yourself. But because I'm a competitor, number one, everyone will see me as being biased, and that's why I will not talk about it. Secondly, there's liability issues, and you know the system here. You say anything to defame them, they'll come after you and try to destroy you. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm not even interested. We do what we do. We know that what we do is a front shariah, and front shariah does everything else.
Do you think they both use the same animals?
With
Maple Lodge and the halal version?
well, the thing is that the animals, like for us, we generally buy from farmers that we know. A lot of people go buy animals, let's say, no, we've already sold all of what we have in Maple Lodge or to this particular one, Bridges, whatever else it may be. So you'll find that they buy from everywhere. They have guys going out and looking, and they go to the stock, they go to the market, they go to the farmers. So generally, yeah, we all kind of generally mix and match. For us, we generally try to buy from people that we know. A guy that I buy from regularly, I know the quality of what he has, I know how much I trust him or kind of, but I don't trust him. Like right now we're switching the beef supplier because we want to go towards, for example, we actually want to go towards organic. I don't want to get into like white veal, the veal that's only ever drank milk. It's never seen anything but milk. And when you eat this particular veal, it's white. The meat is like just a tiny tinge of bacon. And then people will eat and they say it's the most amazing thing they've ever eaten. I've never had it, but I've seen it. It's very beautiful stuff. So anyways, little things like that. But yeah, generally we do buy more of that stuff. Hold on a quick second. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead.
It's kind of a stupid question. The grading, the grading of the meat.
Yeah.
How does it get? Who decides it? And
You can bring in a grader. Alhamdulillah, one of our inspectors is a grader. Although when he comes in for grading, he has to come in at a separate. We have to go through a separate line, not through Ontario, but rather through the organization. But then he goes in, and what they do is they, like, for example, a lot of times they look at the animals and be like, this is that. He like lets them know while I'm going through, but he won't, put the roller on it and say, oh, graded A or B and double or triple A. But generally what happens is that after slaughter is put into the cooler, they let it cool, and then the next day they cut into the ribs, and then they leave it open for however long, and then they come back and then they look at all the marbling and the texture and the amount of fat on the outside and the strength of, all the different details, and then they grade it at that point.
I see. Do they label it as well?
Yeah, they put a roller. Usually, you'll see a pink or red line on the length of the animal, and you'll see it'll say A, double A, or triple A.
I've been asking a few butcher shops here. They say they don't necessarily have to grade it. Is that?
No, we don't grade anything, right? So for us, we only grade the butchers, right? Because again, since after construction, because we shut down since 8, because we ripped out the building and redesigned it so that it's done properly. But for us right now, we're going to get into grading. It's very cheap actually, because it's graded. I thought it was going to be like $20 an animal, but no, it's actually much less than that. And so we're going to start getting our meat graded. What I've realized is, and keep this in mind, what's so funny about this is that I love AAA obviously because I love the flavor of the marbling and so whatever. But if you sell AAA to most butchers, they get pissed off with us. They actually, one of them, he was not happy. I said, why? He said, there's way too much fat on this thing. Because that's what marbling is. It's the fat that's inside the meat and throughout it. So when you have a steak, you don't have to cut some fat with the meat. The fat's inside, so you get all this rich flavor. But the most of the Arab community, for example, they want lean, right? So they want A or double A, which is fine. It's a taste thing. But that's why the Canadian market loves AAA, right? Not because I was born and raised, so I got affected by that, obviously. And so I like this. But yeah, again, it all depends. Like I said, money won't taste. But yeah, you'll find it depends on where you buy. So usually you have to go to larger butcher shops or more kind of fancier butcher shops that will have the higher grades.
My last thing, can consumers can the regular person, citizen, go and buy this AAA grade, or do they leave it for restaurants generally?
No, AAA. If a place says we have AAA, then they have AAA.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, there's another thing too, because this is just for everyone's benefit. Excuse me. It's very good to learn about the cuts. So, for example, tenderloin is the most tender thing in the animal, but it doesn't have a lot of fat, so it doesn't have a lot of flavor. Then you have ribeye, which is the second most tender thing in the animal, but it has a lot of fat, like marble fat. And it's my favorite by far. This is my opinion, the best cut in the whole entire animal. Now, the way that you test a butcher, and then of course it goes down to strip loin, and then all the different ones all the way down to the bottom, which is like the blade or the bottom stuff, is the tough stuff. But if you have, for example, if you want to test a butcher on the quality of where they get their meat from, because, and again, another sort of thing to keep in mind, there's veal, beef, and then calf. Veal is like 700-pound young guys. And then beef is like 1,200, 1,300, 1,400 pounds, you know, up to 1,700 pounds. And there's cow. Cow are old animals that are really tough meat. They're not suitable for food, or they're not suitable for like human teeth, because they're really tough. So if you ever have, and I've had it, if you ever have a ribeye steak, and it's hard to chew, because this should be like butter. If it's hard to chew, that means the person's selling you cow ribeye. If you go to tenderloin and it's not literally just, you can just like squish it with your hand and open it up, that means you're getting it, you're eating cow tenderloin, right? Which is much cheaper. It's about half the price of beef tenderloin. The flavor is not as good, it's much tougher, etc., etc. So these are little things to kind of know when you look at a butcher and you find that he's selling really low grade meat. If you want to request higher grade, ask him, I want AAA beef, not cow. And ask him, you can even ask him, do you sell beef or do you sell cow? And they'll just outright tell you, of course, they'll necessarily lie, but you know, they have to usually say the truth.
Just like a
These are little things to kind of keep in mind. Yes? Oh, okay. Were you gonna? Yeah.
Well, when we're talking about sort of conceptually, talking about halal, then raising the animal, like you said, and organic, how the Western concept is developing and has developed. So for us, it's, the same concept, etc. So the concept of halal, should that include being, from day one, being raised on the the way, sort of the natural way that it's supposed to be raised? Like, should that not be a holistic concept of halal? But we are so focused on, the letter of the law and like slaughtering, and all that, but like it should be a broader concept.
Absolutely, but in terms of the shariah, definition of halal is different than what one person may perceive the concept of halal to be. In terms of the Islamic legislation, halal is defined by the slaughter procedure, and it's not defined by the upbringing. The upbringing can be bad, then you get bad quality meat, your person could have committed haram with the treatment of the animal, but the animal will still be halal if it's slaughtered properly. Shariah, I'm just talking about the minimum shariah standard. Yeah. So, for example, like if you slaughter an animal properly and then you find out that, somebody kicked it a couple times or punched it in the face or, wasn't very nice to it, it's still halal. You can't say we have to throw it on that. That's why the shariah definition of halal is one thing. And then it comes down to other things. For example, you have Muslims, and I don't know if this parallel is necessarily going to be 100% accurate, but I see it as relatively acceptable, which is that you have a Muslim, or not, a person raised outside Islam, he's been eating pork and drinking alcohol, doing every single wrong thing in the whole entire book, smoking and drugs, and then one day he becomes Muslim. The thing is that it gives the person 10 to 15 years, his body can get cleaned out of all the toxins and so on and so forth. His lungs can come back and everything can return. I've seen it with my own eyes. Some person, when I met them when they became Muslim, they could barely even breathe. They were constantly wheezing. They were coughing all the time, and phlegm and gross stuff. Like they were not in good shape. And now I see them and they're in tip-top condition. It's as if they've never even done anything wrong in their life. Their whole body cleanses itself out. So the thing is that it's very possible, very likely that if an animal, for example, at one point was organic and then it started getting raised organic, or at some point, let's say it's the middle point. The most important thing of all of this is that when a person's purchasing, when I go to buy, when my purchasers go to buy, they're responsible for looking for signs of mistreatment. Like one of the purchasers, one of the guys that I buy from, when I walked in there with my Amish farmer and another guy, and we were looking, because I didn't know how to judge the guy, so I had some advisors basically with me. And then what we noticed is when he jumped into the cow pen, he had like 20 big, huge steers in there, and he was playing with them and smacking them around. They weren't running away from him, which means that he's been treating them very well. Whereas other places, if you come anywhere here and they just start running away or they get hostile towards you, that means you've been mistreated. So there's little things that you can notice about how they were treated and so on. Same thing with when they come into our holding pen and you walk up to them. If they become very aggressive or they're really terrified, they are going to walk away from you no matter what. That's how they should be. But there's lots of little things that you can kind of learn to notice to see how they were treated and how they're being known from their body. If they're overly large, if their structure is a little weird because they've been fattened with the wrong kind of feed just to make them big. You can see these things because you notice it's not muscle. It's just big blood, blubbery fat on the outside, little things like that. Yeah.
So you were discussing earlier about how people are just guessing in the dark about what's humane, what's not humane, and so on and so forth. So interesting news that I read the other day was that California banned something called foie gras, which is like fatty liver in ducks or geese. It doesn't have force feed. So what's the Islamic opinion on the force feed animals? Even if, for example, they're just not eating themselves.
thinking, like I said, it comes down to, Rasulullah said you should keep the animal comfortable. Right? A woman was mistreated for starving. Somebody was rewarded for feeding. It all seems to revolve around the same premise, which is taking care, what our concept of taking care is. So, as a parallel, your daughter will eat, or your son will eat. Is it okay to grab them and start shoving food down their mouth over and over and over again just because they don't want to eat? We know naturally that's probably the wrong thing to do. So that's how we know it. When it comes down to animal treatment, if the animal is reacting in a very negative way towards whatever it is that you're doing, you're feeding something and they refuse to eat it, right? So there's a simple example. Let's talk about ants for a while. I don't know if you guys seen this picture online. It's a picture of margarine, lower fat margarine or something like that, and then butter. And they left it out for I don't even know how many days. And the margarine was untouched, and the other margarine, and then the butter was covered in ants. The thing is that animals know what's natural and unnatural. When we bring feed to the animals, you can see when the animal is you bringing something good or bringing something bad. You give them something dirty, like the water is dirty, they won't walk up to it. If you clean it up, they'll start drinking. So when you're shoving something down the animal's throat, maybe you got to ask yourself, first of all, why aren't they eating? And the second thing is that it's really natural. Like you look at things, for example, like the whole mad cow disease thing that happened, right? You look at the industry practice at that point in time. They didn't see anything wrong with feeding animals feeding beef, other beef. And by the way, stunning was one of the causes of mad cow disease. Right? Because the disease was in the brain and certain parts of the body. Now, it wasn't just stunning because there's parts of the intestines that have to be taken out now and so on. But when you blow the brain out and it has mad cow disease, it gets pushed into the bloodstream. And that's why people end up eating brain bits in their bloodstream. And that's why some people got mad cow disease. So that's the thing about the feed. You know, when you know that what you're doing is wrong, it will teach everybody a lesson by putting a disease into the system, or making people sick, or causing an epidemic, or to show people what you're doing is wrong. Or you yourself can see that there's things that are natural. Hay, there's some grains, things that are natural for an animal to eat. But in terms of the fattening process, there may be some I know for example in the animal, with like lamb or whatever, there are fattening procedures. You raise an animal to a certain point, and then when you finish it off, you want to feed it certain things to get it a little bigger. That's what people want, which is okay. But if you're doing it where the animal gains will, you're just shoving things down and you're hurting it, just because you want to get a bigger certain cut or something like that, that's clearly unacceptable. Because you're actually hurting the animal just because you want to meet a certain market standard. Now you can ask what the question you want.
So what what's your view on the sunnah of eating meat once or twice a month? Like, should that be promoted and as part of maybe that is like the vegan sort of a way going, maybe there is some good, because the sunnah seems to be eating very
Yes, that's actually something that I would wonder. Sorry? Last question? Okay, so I'll wait for the last question. So, the first thing of the question is whether or not it is a sunnah. Because I know the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who said that if anybody outside of the peninsula ate as much meat as we would, it would be harmful to them. Okay, so Sahaba were known to eat a lot, and there's actually a narration, and it's actually related to backbiting. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told a Sahaba, he said, go and find these two men and ask them what are they doing. So he ran up to them, and he saw them at a campfire chatting, and he said, what were you doing? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw you in the hellfire. So they said, well, we were just talking about Abu Bakr and Umar. And we said that when they eat a lot, and when they talk a lot. Right, so that's really background of it, just how serious that it is. Even something as simple as that. That's why I said I saw you in hellfire for talking like that about Abu Bakr and Umar. But the thing is that when they eat a lot. And they talk a lot. And the thing is, so we know, like, for example, when the Sahaba, there's also another narration. Anyway, there's lots of narrations about how Sahaba ate and how the scholars ate and so on. And eating meat, I've never seen any evidence that actually says to minimize your meat consumption. Rather, when you're having a meal, you should, as Eddie says, you should only eat enough to keep your back strong. Right? And if you must eat more, then 1/3 for food, 1/3 for water, 1/3 for air. But in terms of minimizing it to once or twice a week, I've never seen evidence like that. But if you do have a hadith that you've heard of that says this, I'd like to see it, but I don't know any narration that says that. Jazakumullah khairan, barakallahu feekum, and may Allah reward all of you for your patience and staying awake during this. Maybe some certain parts were less exciting than others, I don't know. May Allah Azza wa Jalla allow us, again, like I said, to be of those who are motivated to try to bring about change in every small aspect of our lives, and may Allah Azza wa Jalla allow all industries, including the meat ones, to gradually progress due to the influence of good people who are speaking about it, discussing it, and pushing, so that slowly things will get better and better, because the only way they get better is through the actions of people. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allah